Hello, and welcome to today's webinar program, Optimizing Performance Through Collaboration, a synergy between finance and procurement, brought to you by the AP and P2P Network and sponsored by Zycus. We have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we get started. If you have any technical questions or issues using the WebEx platform, please use the chat box and I will respond right away. If you have any issues with the audio, you can click on the phone icon above the chat window to receive teleconference information. For those that do need to call in, to ensure call quality, everyone's lines have been muted today. If you happen to be disconnected, you can log in again using the instructions provided in your confirmation email. But if you continue to experience difficulty, please email webinars@iofm.com and we will respond right away. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please type your questions into the chat box and hit send to submit them. And at the end of the presentation, we will have our presenters answer the questions. If we're not able to get to all questions, we will respond post-webinar via email. This webinar will be recorded and you'll receive a thank you email with the on-demand materials within 2 business days. Our speakers for today are Judy Bicking, the Senior Trainer for IOFM. Her career has been focused on procure-to-pay, order-to-cash, and developing shared service centers in the U.S. and Europe, earning high recognition for process improvement and major cost savings. She led the first departments to earn IOFM AP and AR departmental certification designation. Today, she is a public speaker that's consulting in P2P and O2C. She participated as co-founder and played a major role in writing and conducting certification trainings in these fields. She is a strong believer in raising the bar in these areas. Encourages women through Facebook called Women at Work, and she also owns and operates a retail department store along with her passion in doing mission work at home and abroad. And we also have Manishi and Nilakatan, the trainer for Zycus e-invoicing, with deep interest in AP automation strategies adopted by emerging companies. Meenakshi looks into researching and analyzing the best-in-class practices in the areas of e-invoicing, supplier management, and dynamic discounting. She works with the marketing, product, and sales teams to come up with suitable product enhancements, product positioning, and customer acquisition strategies. Over the past few years, she has acquired knowledge in emerging e-invoicing fields encompassing supplier onboarding, invoice processing, AP automation, and discount management. Regular interactions with analysts, prospects, and customers have led her to have an enhanced understanding of the AP automation market spanning multiple geographies and industries. And at this time, I would like to welcome our speakers.
Hi, before we move on to the topic, just wanted to quickly, take you through the Zycus e-invoicing suite, which is basically an entire touchless invoice processing software solution by Zycus. Basically, we are talking about the supplier information management portal at the start, wherein suppliers can get onboarded, they can manage their data, and also a lot of risk management capabilities are embedded in the system. And when I'm talking about suppliers getting onboarded, it also means that they'll be able to manage the payment status, they'll be able to check the different statuses that might be available on a regular basis. They'll also be able to upload lots of invoices through the system, through the different formats that are supported. And also they'll be able to manage the various discounting programs that the system will be able to offer to them. When it comes to the touchless invoice processing portal, it talks about the invoice matching, which is where the 2-way, 3-way, and 4-way matching actually takes place. And also, when it comes to processing these invoices, a lot of default and dynamic workflows are created in the system. That is something that we are able to manage. And also a lot of reporting and analytics related features which helps with the decision-making processes as well. And specifically talking about dynamic discounting, here is where the actual discounts are optimized. A lot of collaboration takes place between the buyers and the suppliers, and all of these are of course being tracked easily. Next. Just to quickly run you through the agenda, we are talking about some of the priorities that CFOs and CPOs have and the commonalities between them. Also, some areas of tension or pressure between the two departments, and also creating a vision or coming up with strategies to actually fill some of these gaps, and some of the impact areas that might be possible through these strategies. Next. Firstly, talking about the CFO's top priorities, as we all understand, basically when it comes to a CFO, he or she is mainly interested in understanding what sort of savings are actually happening in the organization. We are also interested in a lot of financial reporting and analytics related capabilities when it comes to a particular software, wherein they'll be able to make some key decisions based on a lot of analytics support that might be offered. And of course, they are interested in risk management and compliance management related features as well. Next. When it comes to the CPO's top priorities, we see that there are certain commonalities between a CFO and a CPO, wherein, of course, the CPOs, again, are interested in a lot of cost-saving opportunities from the procurement side. They are also interested in knowing what sort of profits and revenue growth might be possible. And they are again interested in risk management, but more towards the contract management part because they handle a lot of contracts. And here is where we sort of take a look at the commonalities, wherein we clearly try to understand exactly what some of the key areas could be. Basically, those are cost reductions, a lot of savings generation, and a lot of risk management as well. Next. And here is actually the area or the need for an alliance, wherein in most of the organizations we see that sometimes CFOs report to CPOs report to CFOs. There are a lot of organizations wherein the roles actually overlap completely, wherein sometimes one particular person might be handling both the roles simultaneously. Because of this, we see that there are certain shared objectives and needs. There are a lot of concerns around how exactly costs can be minimized and savings can be optimized, and this is where we see that both the roles can actually add a lot of business value and look for solutions that not just will be able to satisfy some of their individual department level issues or needs, but also look at solutions that can solve some of the problems of the company at an overall level. Next. So here we look at some of the causes for tension and pressure between these two departments. Next. The first one is in terms of some of the variations in the savings that are captured. So what we realize is that, of course, different organizations have different measurements when it comes to savings or the kind of profits that they are making. But there is a slight change when it comes to these two departments, which we'll take a look at in the next slide. We see that there are lots of discrepancies when it comes to recording or reporting some of the savings, because these two departments basically are handled by two different stakeholders, which also means that since we are talking about two different departments, these could have multiple systems which capture all these details. And when it comes to the definition of savings, it means that basically the definitions might be different, and because of which some of the benchmarks that might be followed by the two different departments might also be different. In the sense that, just to give you an example, some major savings that are captured by, say, one department could be considered to be very minuscule by the other department. So that is where the variation comes into the picture. And that also takes us to the next part, which is visibility into the P2P process. Both finance and procurement roles are interested in different areas when it comes to understanding what sort of impact their department is having on the organization at an overall level. Like for example, finance will be more interested in knowing exactly what is happening with the way their budgets are managed, and also they are interested in understanding exactly where the different cost or the spend is actually sort of segregated, and also they are more interested in understanding how exactly payables can be managed. But when it comes to procurement, again, we see similar areas wherein they are interested in, again, seeing that the budgets are allocated properly, the contracts are negotiated well, and also when it comes to compliance, when it comes to specific vendors or suppliers that they have, they need to ensure that they are up to date when it comes to the compliance management part. And also when it comes to any maverick spends, they want to ensure that it's managed well. And that is where they are interested in taking a holistic view of the entire P2P solution or system that might be in place, so that they can specifically look at certain individual areas of interest, but at the same time they can get a single view of truth through the system, which could help them get a realistic picture in terms of the spends or the costs that might be associated with their organization. And that is also one of the major points that actually get highlighted through the Zycus e-invoicing solution as well, wherein it sort of helps companies handle or manage data in a smarter fashion and basically get a view across the different systems or different data points through a single view, which also gets us to the next point, which talks about some of the process inefficiencies that might be present in the system because of lack of data consistency when it comes to different departments. So these inefficiencies could lead to lots of errors. It could lead to a lot of disputes between the different departments. There could be a lot of delays because of some of the errors that might be present in the system. And of course, since we are talking about manual interventions, there could be a lot of duplicates as well. So this is where an automated solution comes in handy, where you're basically talking about eliminating paper completely. You're talking about increasing the accuracy levels. You are also talking about improving the processes when it comes to, say, automating some of the invoice processing systems, or even if it talks about any of the data management related capabilities, we're talking about more savings and smarter management of data. Which gets us to the next point, which is basically transformation that happens across the different departments, which is a good point, definitely, because companies and departments do want to transform some of their existing applications. But the actual problem comes when you're talking about lack of consistency or best practices that might be shared across the different departments. So basically what we are saying is that having some of the transformation plans in place is a good point. It's definitely a good initiative. But what needs to be taken care of is the point where you're talking about converging some of the opportunities or some of the plans that you might be having in terms of improving the processes at a company level. So basically, all the departments should have similar aims, and these aims should again have or converge into a common strategy or transformation plan, because these will mostly be in terms of automating some of the manual processes, and that is where we do suggest commonalities or common plans when it comes to some of the strategies. Which takes us to the next point, which is basically some of the reporting and monitoring systems that are present in the company. So again, when you're talking about different departments, they might be following different monitoring systems, which is fine, but the problem occurs when there are different data sources and views of the same data, which means that it becomes very difficult to track any of the data points in real time. And when you're talking about, say, any organizational goals that you might be having, it is definitely advisable to have a solution which helps you track the organizational goals in a real-time or on a real-time basis, and also at an overall company level, rather than just looking at it from a department-specific level. Next. Other causes of tension again could be in terms of any of the data inaccuracies or frauds that might be present in the system, and that is why we suggest that it's better to set a common goal when it comes to any credit terms with suppliers as well, so that any of the risks or fraud can be managed in a holistic fashion. Next.
Meenakshi, along with a really good system to help move this process along, we also really need to get performance through collaboration, because if we don't align the finance and the procurement groups together, they still tend to work against each other. They've got different goals, different missions. So what we really need to do is we say performance through collaboration, but that's not what's really happening within our organizations. And we've really got to get down to why. Well, for a lot of companies, it's the silos that we've created. We work in separate departments. We may work in separate buildings. And again, based on our missions and visions, we have different goals. Now, every department is under the constraint to reduce costs, so there's a commonality there. What we really need to get on the finance side is not just reducing costs, but also savings, because that's going to help us align with the procurement group. The finance functionalities within companies are traditionally to support their customers, their clients, and these are internal customers and clients. There are accounting folks who help the departments with their budgets, making sure they understand their budget, how to set up their budget, how to be compliant. So finance traditionally sees themselves as a supporting organization. And I hope through this webinar and some new discoveries, we're going to find out that that's not the case specifically for accounts payable's role within the financial organization, that they can actually become a partner to procurement and really build a very strong collaboration with them, breaking down those silos, breaking down the walls. We can improve our efficiencies and our effectiveness, but most accounts payable departments, they really believe that their role in the organization is to be the best invoice processor. Is that how your AP sees themselves? And again, that's that support role to procurement. We bought it, we received it, now we got to get it paid. Yet, what I really want to uncover for you is that accounts payable within that finance group really needs to see themselves in the broader scope. Our final finance product that comes out of that division are financial statements, and AP has a very big role in the data that is fed to the general ledger that creates the financial statements. So unfortunately, the C-suites do see accounts payable as that invoice processor. And in their minds, they think, what is so hard about paying an invoice, right? So the issue is, in every organization, whether you're PO-driven, non-PO-driven, or have a combination of both, AP cannot do their job unless they have full cooperation from the entire organization, from every requester, every budget holder who has to prove, from the buyers. It is a difficult job because AP has to pay the invoice on time and accurately. And when we say on time, it really means within the month that we incurred those goods and services. That's when we need to get it on the books. So how can AP achieve this when they can't approve an invoice, they don't know if they've gotten the goods and services, and I hate to say this, but between 40 and 60% of the time, the invoice doesn't even go to accounts payable. So accounts payable starts to feel like they're fighting City Hall. I know that's an old statement and I'm dating myself, but my picture does that for me anyway. There's definitely a difference between what procurement needs are, what the requisitioner's needs are, the approver's needs, and how they see getting these invoices paid and the suppliers paid. We have policies and procedures that fight each other. So how does procure to pay actually affect our organization? There isn't too many folks within the organization that's not affected by procure to pay. I do want to stretch our goals. We've come a long way thinking end to end, but really we need to encompass so much more than just procuring the goods and paying for them. We need to start thinking about this and building a process that's from thought of need all the way through financial statements, really embracing the whole end-to-end. And we also need to think about just because I paid it doesn't necessarily mean the payment's been settled or that it's right, because there's an open window of payments that are never cashed, and there's laws around how we have to govern those payments as well. So we need systems, visions, goals, and priorities to align these two groups. Right now, as Manisha told you, procurement, they're looking mostly at the strategies of their suppliers, and the highest priority strategic suppliers they're looking at is any supplier that provides them with the goods to build their product or service, which we refer to as inventory. Unfortunately for accounts payable, that's high dollars but very low volume. It is well maintained. It tends to be those higher dollars and goes through fairly smoothly because every eye is on that inventory process. But what accounts payable is dealing with is all spend, not only inventory, but materials, repairs, and operating expenses, MRO. Some call it indirect. I like to call it maverick because most non-inventory is going to the requisitioner's control, buying whatever they want, wherever they want, whenever they want, at whatever cost. These invoices tend to be low dollars, but extremely high volume for accounts payable. So, if accounts payable truly has no control over this process, and the accounting financial group supports and needs the cooperation of the buyers in the organization, how are we going to achieve this? How are we going to pull these groups together? Because honestly, without that cooperation, suppliers are not getting paid accurately nor on time. So let's break down those silos. Let's start building a strong partnership, building a bridge between operations and finance. And how do we do that, and why finance? Why accounts payable? Well, we're the ones feeling the pain. Right now, for most of us, procurement under operations and finance accounts payable are forced to work together. And they see many issues because they're on the opposite side of some of the things that are so important, like discounts. Accounts payable wants to be able to pay the invoice on time so we can start recovering discounts. Discounts is money we get to keep in our pocket. It's a % off for paying on time. Most buyers feel, I just negotiated best price, best quality, best delivery, and now you want me to get discounts too? They feel like this is really a negative approach. They don't really understand the value of money and that there is a discount that companies, suppliers are willing to give to get the money in sooner. Purchasing card. A lot of times buyers fight that because they want control over everything that's being bought, even though they don't have control over the non-PO. And of course, accounts payable wants it because invoices say particularly under $1,000, high volume, put it on the P card. It's a better process. What belongs on a purchase order? What doesn't belong on a PO? Too many times this process actually is focusing on people. Those people never. We're real good at pointing the finger at each other. And I know I lived and breathed, you know, accounts payable, building shared service centers, trying to make that mission work, setting goals around it to help us achieve it and stay focused. But every day I heard callers coming in saying, you people never pay the invoice on time. And of course, we would blame the requester, the buyer, the process. We need to focus on the process and get the people out of our language. This makes it less personal and actually can help people come to the table. The biggest thing I find is that we are looking at this data from different perspectives. Now, I love this slide. When you first looked at it, are you one that saw 3 logs or did you see 4 logs? It has to do with where you stand and where your eye goes. So if you saw 3, you're most likely focused at the top side of the log. If you shift your view to the bottom side of the log, you'll now see 4 of them. The whole idea of getting collaboration in our organizations is actually shifting our viewpoint and seeing what's going on at the other functions so that we can start to build a process that's really going to help us align the work. We've got to change not only the organization's perception, but in a lot of times for finance and accounts payable, we need to change our perspective. The C-suite has to not look at us as just bill payers, but they have to look at what we can bring to the table. And I'm going to go over that in a second. Honestly, buyers see accounts payable process as a nuisance and busy work. The requesters really believe accounts payable is out of control. That's where that you never people comments really come from. The supplier is contacting accounts payable because they know that's who processes the payments. And the supplier's accounts receivable department, when they call AP, typically get this response. They're calling about a past due invoice and AP says, I need a copy. AR believes that AP is stalling to extend terms. They really had the invoice. This is just a great way to get longer terms out of the payment. And really that's not the case. Like I mentioned earlier, 40 to 60% of the times the invoice went somewhere else, but not to accounts payable. So it puts AP in a defensive situation, and that's how they react to these scenarios. Sometimes we have systems that conflict. We may not be on the same system operations is on, so procurement is working on one ERP, AP under the finance umbrella is working under another ERP. There's missing data, lost data, there's duplicate records. Field lengths don't match. I remember we had an inventory product that was 0.0005, and AP got 2 decimal points, so the price came over as 0.00, couldn't pay the invoice. We have different system languages, different acronyms, product descriptions, quantities. They may order in eaches because that's what they need, but the supplier bills us in their stock keeping unit of measure, which could be dozens, cases, lots. There's all kinds of system conflicts that we have to deal in this scenario. So changing our perception so that we actually see our real impact to the financial process. Typically what we are doing is we are managing the debt. We react to the invoice. Most times the invoice is the first notification to the company that there is a debt, especially in the non-PO world. So what we need to do is move this. We have to shift from debt management to cash management. This helps us to become a business partner to the finance arena. If I know there's bills that are coming due and I can age them from tomorrow, next week, next month, 2, 3 months out, controllers and CFOs can better manage the cash than they are in reacting to the debt, meaning we enter an invoice into the system today and now it's so past due, I got to pay it today. We always say that we need to reduce fraud. So here's another terminology that I want you to think about. We need to eliminate fraud. Our goal needs to be focused on elimination, not reducing. And by having that goal of eliminating, maybe someday we'll actually get there and shut down fraud. We also need to think about bottom line savings. That's the data on the invoice. It isn't processing the invoice. It's what information is on the invoice and how can it better serve the company to actually have bottom line savings. Traditionally, accounts payable is the back office, but in reality they are becoming the first face to the supplier. And how is that happening? The more we automate the purchasing process, there is no contact between buying and the suppliers who can provide those goods and services. And the only time those suppliers are physically calling, reaching out people to people, is when the invoice is past due. And who are they calling? Accounts payable. So now accounts payable is the face of your company. And they've got to be trained on that. How are they impacting future buys, the relationship of those vendors? spend, total spend, inventory, non-inventory spend is one of the largest contributors to the finance statement. And we have to keep focused on the impact that we have to the financial statements. How do we do that? We need to bridge a gap between the finance and the procurement teams. Traditionally, purchasing is under the CPO, the Chief Operating Officer, and AP is under the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer. So how do we bridge these two? Because these C-suite officers definitely have different missions and visions for their organizations. What if our org chart, rather than that block structure that actually makes us look like we're separate, you can see the silos already in that process. What if it was something that looked like the mechanisms of a well-oiled machine, where we see how we interact and interface with each other, and that the output really needs to be bottom line savings? Today, the work controls us. What we really need to start thinking about is either you run the day or the day is going to run you. We react to the phone calls. We're reacting to the emails. We're reacting to that invoice that pops in that's past due. What if we had a system that stopped that process and actually gave us, and what I'm trying to show here in the bottom right-hand corner is like a dashboard with real-time data that drove how we do it. How many invoices are under 1,000? How many are over? How many invoices are past due? I can't mess with the due date if I really want to know how many invoices are past due. Once it's received in the mailroom, what's that cycle time look like? You need real data. The other thing we need to do is, in aligning those two organizations, from moving from that siloed org chart to that well-oiled machine, we actually need a new mission statement, one that is built around collaboration, not around being the best invoice processor. This is something I wrote. I was just trying to, put that into a mission statement to build a cohesive relationship with procurement and suppliers, to develop a compliant purchasing strategy for goods and services to meet the needs of the organization while making a positive impact to the bottom line while protecting the cash, supporting the cash management strategy with timely, accurate data to the financial statements. That is a mission that if we drive towards that, we'll start breaking down those silos and we will start building a stronger organization. So what's that going to take? We need technology that's actually going to give us what we need to do our real mission. So I want real-time data. I want to eliminate paper. So I don't want a one-touch. I want a no-touch process where it flows through. I remove errors and I remove redundancy from the process. I want it to be efficient, but I want it to be easy. I want to reduce costs. I need to align goals. I need to bring P2P together for that true collaboration. I'm giving you this one statistic because this really is good when you're looking for technology will help you build your ROI, not based on headcount reduction, but on real savings. This is just one of them. This is on the efficiency side. This is the Gartner Group. A 5% reduction in operating costs equals a 30% increase in sales in terms of effect on the bottom line. I have proved that so many times with the technology at various companies. You can take that metric to the bank. So taking charge with technology. We not only want to meet the C-suite's expectations, but we want to surpass them. We need to change the perspective, moving that focus to where we're actually using the data. Where can we save money at the bottom line? I actually have a list of about 32 ways we can add to the bottom line. These are just a few of them. But it means when you put in technology, don't give up all your headcount that the technology can save. You need to pull those folks into new roles. so that we can move from debt management to cash management. We can have, not only do we set our budgets, but we actually can control them and meet the budgets. How many times do we exceed our budgets because of surprise purchases? We can eliminate fraud, but be compliant to so many laws and regulations. I don't know if you've looked at the unclaimed property laws, but they are strict, and there's like 34 items that we should be complying against, and the states are hiring more auditors to make sure that we align and become compliant. How would you like to reduce closing time from C+7 to C+1 or C0? It is so automated that getting everything into the books for those financial statements happens automatically. Someone to run a controlled, strong P-card program. Discount management, if you build that discount pot, you can put so much money against that bottom line savings that will equal a 36% annual interest rate. You're going to get the C-suite's attention with that one as well. Spend management. You need to look at all commodities, not what's just going through as a purchase order. And when I say sharing your AP data, that's what I'm talking about. You need to make procurement aware of what doesn't go through a PO so that they can see all the commodities that are being purchased, and you guys can start controlling your spend. I mentioned unclaimed property and recovery audits, which really tell you where duplicate payments are going through, if your vendor master file needs to be cleaned up, where errors and bottlenecks are happening. So that's it. You can pay for an outside audit or use some of this freed up headcount to do it internally.
So thanks, Judy. I completely agree with your point wherein you spoke about increasing the bottom line savings rather than just looking at the specific department level savings. And that gets us to the point wherein we are talking about actually utilizing technology and leveraging it to actually drive collaboration across the two departments. So as, just to quickly sum up some of the challenges that we spoke about, wherein we see that there is a lack of collaboration in terms of the two departments, wherein you see that different savings definitions are present, and also some of these companies, I mean, the problem is that there's no common baseline in terms of measuring some of the savings that might be possible through these two departments. And again, one more problem is that there is a lack of standards when it comes to actually measuring any of these savings. And when we talk about technology, one of the basic benefits of using technology, when we talk about the role of the technology, will be that it will act as a platform which will help both these departments come to a common base in terms of measuring their savings. Also, when it comes to any baselines or any standards that might be present in terms of tracking some of the measurements in terms of the performance improvements or some of the organizational goals that they might be setting for themselves, it becomes a lot easier because there will be a single source of truth in front of both the departments, in fact in front of the entire organization, which makes it easier to track a lot of the activities and a lot of the spend that might be happening in the organization. The benefits, of course, will be that there will be better financial impact in terms of basically having a holistic impact on the organization rather than just at a department level. And also, because of the single source of truth, there will be better forecasting and tracking to understand exactly what is happening with the budgets, and also in terms of planning any savings opportunities that might be present in the organization. Interestingly, there was this one Institute of Supply Management survey that was conducted, wherein a lot of CPOs were asked exactly what some of their key goals were, and understandably, almost around 60% of the respondents said that they were interested in capturing savings. and almost 30% mentioned that profits and revenue growth were some of the key concern areas for them. And also when it comes to risk management, just like Judy mentioned, almost 28% were interested in managing risks in a much smarter and a better way. And also working capital was pretty important to almost 15% of them. So as we see that many of the people, many of not just these respondents, but we see that many of the procurement as well as the finance professionals are interested in knowing what is happening in terms of savings, in terms of costs that is going out from the organization, also in terms of the compliance part. They are really interested in knowing exactly what is happening at the different department levels as well. Which brings us to the next point, which is basically the impact of a strong procurement-finance relationship, wherein if you have a greater alignment between the two departments, it can definitely improve the overall budget management strategies that might be present in the organization, since now both the teams will be having the entire view of the data and they'll be able to plan in a much better way. Also, savings that go directly or that basically contribute directly to the bottom line, just like Judy mentioned, you can expect almost around 30% reduction in terms of costs and almost around 40% improvement in terms of the processes if you have a good system in place, and that of course leads to improved profits as well. Next, just to sum it up, we'll just talk about, just take around 2 minutes to talk about the comprehensive S2P suite that is present with Zycus, wherein it sort of takes care of all the factors that we just mentioned about. So be it any savings management software which can help you track exactly how much savings you're able to generate, or any spend analysis related software which can help you spend intelligently by looking at the past data, sort of forecasting exactly where you might be required to spend in the future, or any supplier management related issues that you might be having which can be solved through the supplier management portal, wherein you can onboard suppliers, you can manage their data, or even when you're talking about the e-procurement module, which helps both the procurement and the finance professionals to get a single view of the data in terms of planning a lot of the activities that might be present in the organization, or the overall e-invoicing suite which ensures that you're able to seamlessly move towards a touchless e-invoicing or an invoice processing approach. We have got it sorted. So just would like to conclude by saying that the future lies in tighter integration between the procurement and the finance professionals. And if these two departments come together, it will really act as a win-win solution for both the departments.
Thank you, Meenakshi and Judy, for a great presentation. We have time for a Q&A. Just a reminder to ask your questions in that chat box, and we will get to them shortly. We have a few questions that have come in so far. Our first question is, how do we deal with a situation where procurement has information that is essential to processing invoice but refuses to give it to AP?
I'm sorry, Laura, could you just give that to me one more time?
Okay. How do you deal with a situation where procurement has information that is essential to processing an invoice but refuses to give it to AP?
Okay, and it just is a good example of how much conflict there is between procurement and AP. And it doesn't sound like you have a system that provides the information for you. And if we're going ERP to ERP, a lot of times it'll bring fields across, but if the procurement person put it in the body of the email, that doesn't transfer to the AP department. So you're in a very difficult situation, and sometimes it's really hard to get procurement to come to the table to discuss these types of things. And I really, truly believe what turned us around was a system that aligned our groups so that we actually got what we needed. It was mapped out properly, and AP was able to pay the bills. You want a system where, the procurement data is so accurate, the receipt data comes in, and actually the invoice is just setting up the payment because it automatically matches, and that AP role doesn't need to take place on those perfect matches. Again, that's where the other roles I had on that slide come into play, where you're actually helping take a head count and move it towards bottom line savings. So I would start out by maybe having some mapping meetings. Definitely have some metrics around how often this happens, because that shows the level of impact that it has to getting the suppliers paid on time. I like mapping meetings because when you get them to the table, supported by metrics, again, about how many times certain transactions happen or errors happen or bottlenecks happen, you start to resolve what you need. I do believe, though, it's going to probably lead you to automation because that removes those types of scenarios.
Thank you. We have a question here. What are a few strategies that might help bridge, you've kind of answered this already, but what are a few strategies that might help bridge the gap between finance and procurement?
Okay. Yeah, I have a little bit of a different answer for this one, because what I think we need to do is we have to start with that mission and vision and build one that's more focused on procure to pay rather than finance having their goals, procurement having theirs. A lot of times this is, again, a very old statement, what's in it for them. We need to understand, what does procurement need from finance? So for one thing I can think of right off the top of my head is procurement looks at the data from commodities. Accounts payable, finance looks at it from suppliers. Well, how can we help provide them with what they need, especially in the non-PO category? And that would be if we assigned, every time we opened up a vendor in the master file, we assigned it a commodity code that said, these are the types of commodities they sell. Now we're giving them financial data in an avenue where they can relate it to what they do. So sometimes it's listening to them first. I like the job sharing method. Go to procurement for a couple of days and shadow different roles in the procurement department. Listen. Don't do too many suggestions at this time. It's really about finding out what they do, ask questions about their process, then bring it back to create that meeting about how you guys can align better using metrics, total spend, commodity. Start aligning your language, and that will help you align your mission and your vision.
Thank you. We have a question here. Who are the stakeholders who might get impacted by this change in approach?
You know, I was surprised how far and wide the change impacted all the way up to our C-suite, where they had to realign our C officers. We had a chief officer of operations, of which procurement fell under, in which we also had a CPO, chief procurement officer, and then our chief financial officer. We actually, by working together with procurement and aligning our mission and vision, forced it upstream, where our C-suite actually had to say, wait a minute, because they disagreed on their viewpoint. Remember that log picture? And they had to come to some agreements. Some very, very progressive organizations are restructuring their C-suite to get that collaboration. They are starting to align the C-suite. First, it started out with, okay, who's going to own AP and who's going to own procurement? So some AP fell under procurement, and for some, procurement fell under the finance side of the house. But, you know, for the very progressive, they're actually changing their C-suite office to be end-to-end. So from record to report, from order to cash, from procure to pay. So this process is going to help your whole organization start a whole new realm of collaboration, breaking down silos, and making the process effective, efficient, compliant. You're going to really add to the bottom line, and the effect also goes out to your suppliers, because they start looking at the same types of scenarios, and if they can save money, they pass that down to you in pricing. Now you've really got a win-win.
Thank you. We have a question here. If I am an AP manager Whom should I first approach with this proposal for a collaboration?
Okay. You know, I remember my AP managers coming to me when I was the director of the Shared Service Center saying, why us? I mean, really, why do we have to do this? Well, honestly, for the rest of the organization, they're pretty okay with the way they're doing things. They're okay just picking up the phone and buying from anywhere, anytime, any place for whatever cost, and then we overnight it to boot. So sorry if we have any overnight carriers on the line, but we just keep doing it in a method that's costing our company money. Why AP? Why the AP manager? Because you've got the facts and the data of total spend. You have the facts and the data of actual spend. How many times do you know your organization to set up a PO, if they do set up a PO for $1, just because they don't care what it costs, they need it, they want it, get it delivered, and then the invoice comes in and mismatches because they just set it up for $1. They didn't do their research, they didn't do their homework, they just took the easy path. So that's why AP. And we've got the data to do the presentation to actually move the organization. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, oh, wait a minute, you know, we've tried this, and it's not happening. One other metric that I truly believe helps cement this is if you not only get your volume metrics and your cost metrics and that type of thing, but then you align best practices, how the system can manage the process. And I'm going to use an easy example because of the time that we've got. But look at how we pay the bills, right? If I pay in a paper check, that payment process on its own, just cutting a paper check, may cost your organization $35 to $55, depending on your process and how many signatures you got to acquire to actually have the check live. If I do it EFT, I'm talking pennies to get the EFT payment to the supplier. So if I have someone who doesn't want to move to these best practices and use the system, a lot of times you can get them on logic. Say, hey, I'll be happy to do a wire for you. Did you know it costs $35, where an EFT just costs pennies? A wire is guaranteed within 20 minutes, and EFT is guaranteed by tonight. If it's the weekend, you know, it might be a couple of more days. Which would you like now? So AP manager should be in charge of educating the organization and moving this collaboration forward.
Thank you. We have a question here. What are the objections that might come up when we change the organization's approach to a collaborative one?
Well, I know you've all heard this one, but they like it the old way. They're comfortable with the old way. They know the old way. They feel they have control over the old way. So you're going to run into some of those. Automation, if you select this type of automation for your organization, you've actually made it easier. The way they're doing it today is harder, more time-consuming. There's more work on the requisitioner's part than there needs to be. If you provide them with a system that's point and click, we're all used to that in our personal life now. They adapt to it very quickly. So you want to make sure that you've listened to them and that you apply a process that's easier, automated, routes to where it needs to go, because a lot of times buyers also fight us because if there's a mismatch, we're sending it to the buyer, and the buyer may then need to reach out to the supplier or the requisition. Partly that's because they want to control those relationships. But in an automated system, if I'm lacking a receipt, it's going to go right to the person who should have received it and ask them, did you get it? Bypassing 2 or 3 steps, right? So we want it to be faster, easier, quicker, instantaneous. Give me some metrics that I need to do my job better as well. So yes, you're going to hear objections and you need to be ready for them. One is they'll try to work around your process until you lock arms with procurement and don't let them work around the new process so that you get compliance as well. So then you, in fact, enforce cooperation. But if you have the C-suite behind you, they can't work around you. because the C-suite is going to stand on your policies and procedures. And I'll be honest with you, I got pretty bold as I lived through the pain of being on the AP side of the house. When we implemented our automation and the policies and procedures that went with it and got the buy-in from procurement. So we literally went in with from the same perspective, what the organization needed to do to buy goods and services. I literally looked at the C-suite officers and said, when you sign off on these policies and procedures, I want you to know that you are signing off on not allowing any workaround. And they agreed. So when the time came, I reminded them, you promised me no workarounds. So get your C-suite buy-in, makes your life much easier.
And just to add to Judy's points, I think one more area where there could be an objection could be in terms of the different standards or definitions that both the procurement and the finance departments might be having. So that is where the point of collaboration actually comes into the picture, wherein the departments need to look at it from, from the point of view of an organization rather than a department level, wherein they need to come to a common ground in terms of some of the definitions or some of the goals that they might be having, which can take the organization a step ahead.
Great. That looks like that was our final question. I do have a few housekeeping notes to go over before we close out. We've had some people ask about the on-demand webinar and the handout. Everyone will receive an email within 2 business days with the on-demand version of this webinar and a PDF link of the presentation. So please look for those materials in your inbox within 2 business days. Also, if you could please fill out the short evaluation form that will appear once you close out of the webinar window so that we can better serve your needs in future webinars, that would be greatly appreciated. And thank you again to all of our participants today and to both of our speakers. This webinar was brought to you by the AP and P2P Network and sponsored by Zycus. Thank you, and have a great day, everyone.